Hello, I'm Glenn Brooks. It's so good being with you today. Here on the Vibrant Living Network, prn.fm. Today's a particularly moving format. I get to be again with my mentor in our series on vibrant longevity community and explore how we could lengthen our telomeres, become younger, go beyond the conditioning that makes us feel like we're not fully here and alive where we can be. Norm's written over 40 books. He's a pioneer. Some people call Norm. I call Norm the father of holistic medicine. In my heart, he's my deep uncle. He's Dr. Norm Shealy, who's with us, and Dr. Eben Alexander, who wrote Proof of Heaven. How I discovered Proof of Heaven was I was talking to people, and before I would get off the phone, there was a doctor in New York. She says, Glenn, my partner just lost a son at 30. What helped him, and my son, I want to honor my son, Michael Brooks, who passed away July 20th. And anyway, I felt a sense of camaraderie and family with Dr. Eben immediately, and I wrote this letter, and I heard back, and it was like, I see what I want to do is bridge these two worlds of like how we could have this experience of living this or infinite life here and share that with people that have passed on, and have methods, awareness, and practices that allow us to celebrate their love in a way that allows us to go from the local mind to the big mind of the infinite mind. And I'm just honored about this today. I want to welcome Lily, who's a very dear friend, and a writer, too, a writer. Welcome, Lily. Norm, welcome, Norm. Before we got on the air, I said to Dr. Eben, that I said, Norm recalls 30 of his lifetimes. And I realized over the last, I've known Norm 34 years, but over the last 10 years, Norm's beloved wife had passed away, and I'm still getting used to where my son is. He's in my heart. I get up every day and I open my chest in imagery, and I put my son's heart in my heart. I joke to Michael, I'm doing a dedication series on dogs called Vibrant Dogs, Vibrant People. And since Norm has told me that the only thing better than one German Shepherd is two, I'm obviously making my ambassador dog a German Shepherd. Thank you, Norm. Norm, I want to open this up today because there's this interesting paradox. The paradox I think we get conditioned by is that having a body is really where it's at, and that dying is this dreary end of things. And another paradox is we don't really learn how to live and grow young and reverse our telomeres and lengthen our telomeres. How do you see this topic, and you see it deeply, you work with people on it, how would you want to introduce the topic of being both vibrantly alive while you're here and embracing this thing called passing on, and then being in touch with the others to feel the fullness of their love and presence here? Welcome.
Well, interestingly, I would think it began at age 4. I was climbed up on a 50-pound lard, 50-gallon lard can. My grandparents used to buy it like that to watch my uncle making a snowman out the window. Grandma comes in and said, "Bud, be careful, you hurt yourself." I said, "Grandma, don't worry. If you're going to die, you're going to die." Even at that age, I had no fear of death. I knew that, somehow we continue after death. And, of course, growing up in the South, I had to go to funerals of people I'd never heard of, great aunts and great uncles and distant cousins. And I was always told to go kiss the body.
Really?
And it never upset me. I grew up with that concept that it's okay. They are still okay. And I've never lost that feeling. Now, obviously, my wife of 52 years, certainly the closest person other than my parents in my entire life, and I wasn't ready for her to go, and neither of us was ready for her to go. But I know she's okay, and I've had many, many messages, including her visiting a close friend of ours who brought me the same message. So, to me, the physical body is a temporary thing, no matter how long we live. Now, my great-grandmother died at 102, and my great-great-grandfather made it into his late 90s. So, even as a child, I expected to live past 100, but I don't have a definitive time, and I don't think we should.
That's pretty beautiful. My grandfather died suddenly. He went to the doctor. I was going to live with him in a condo, and he went to the doctor. He had really bad diabetes. He was the only person I felt loved by. He didn't hit me. He took me on walks. My grandmother I never saw my grandmother stand up. She had rheumatoid arthritis. And I was always perplexed about this. It didn't quite make sense to me. I think I became a professional hypochondriac, too. I was really scared about illness. I was able to do that really well, actually. So what happened was my grandfather passed away, and I realized at a certain point he lived in my heart, and I didn't really relate to my parents, and yet I sensed there was something beyond, but I never had an introduction like you did. I never knew it was safe or okay to die, and I always kind of wondered. And when one of my teachers passed away in 1976, Paul Bragg, I felt really down. Dr. Eben Alexander, Proof of Heaven, what's your story? What's your story about life and healing? Like, you're a neurosurgeon. You have a very strong outer schooling. How did this other education, I know you share the story in different ways. What would you share today that's most relevant about your story of having this bigger experience of life, how it's altered your life? What would you share? Anything early on in your childhood, like Norm, or what was your first moment?
Well,
Welcome.
I just, I had spent my life in what I would say a fairly kind of conventional setting in terms of my education understanding. Of course, Norm was a colleague with my father. My father was an academic neurosurgeon, and so they had similar training. But I promise you, Norm, you're especially with 30 past lives to remember, you have quite an advance beyond my capabilities of understanding all that. Certainly from my childhood and my formal training, I was, basically brought along in a very conventional sense of understanding the physical as being the world that exists. I studied physics, chemistry, biology, neuroscience, cosmology, every bit of it, kind of based in that physicalist or materialist mindset. And that's why what happened to me back in November 2008 was such a complete revolution in my thinking and my own understanding. I came down with a severe case of gram-negative bacterial meningoencephalitis that involved all 8 lobes of my brain. It drove me into coma within 3.5 hours. And I was deathly ill from this, and I spent 7 days in coma before I started coming back to this world. There is a medical case report on my medical records that goes even further than I did in Proof of Heaven in terms of making the case that my brain was too besieged by this infection to have been able to come up with any kind of dream or hallucination. I think that's why a lot of scientists who study consciousness take my particular case pretty seriously, because of the amount of damage to my neocortex that should have gotten rid of any ability to have an extraordinary spiritual experience like I did have. And also the recovery is something that is really kind of astonishing. To spend 7 days in coma from that severe bacterial meningoencephalitis, it really doesn't seem possible that one would have a complete recovery, which I was blessed with over 2 months. And so really it completely changed my view of the nature of consciousness. As a neurosurgeon who had believed for all those many years that somehow the brain was the producer of consciousness, this was a giant shock, because every bit of my experience is detailed, not only in Proof of Heaven, but in our third book, Living in Mindful Universe, that I wrote with my life partner, Karen Newell. And that's really about the scientific revolution that's coming from all this. And, of course, I think Dr. Shealy has been involved in that revolution for decades.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm not giving him any news, but I must say I've learned a lot, Norm, and I appreciate that people like you have really kind of led the way, kind of opened the door for our modern world to realize it from a scientific viewpoint, we need to realize that essentially we're spiritual beings in a spiritual universe, and it's a beautiful and expansive lesson for any of us to come to realize the power of this shift in worldviews, because for all those who are bereaved and have lost a loved one, to realize that the soul of their loved one is still actively involved in this universe is a great revolution and is a revelation, and is very exciting. And that, I would say, in many ways is thanks to work that you and like-minded thinkers have done for decades now to help alert us to this grander possibility.
Well, I think I was always open to the possibility of reincarnation, didn't think about it until I had an out-of-body experience in 1972. And it was following my out-of-body experience that I had that same day my first past life recall. Mm-hmm. And I saw myself as a physician in Egypt 3,000 years ago in a cholera epidemic. Wow. And, since that time, I've, collected a whole bunch of... I've been asked to write a 25,000-word document proving that human consciousness survives physical death. And I've got about 16,000 words written on past life experiences, not only of mine, but, of course, quoting a lot of other people. But I do believe that the evidence is overwhelming that human consciousness continues forever.
Well, I agree. I mean, it's something that the last 12 years since my coma, I've been working with scientists and with other physicians, with other experiencers to try and hammer out this mechanism, how this all works. But I would agree with you completely. And from my point of view, one of the strongest bodies of scientific evidence that supports the eternity of soul and of our connections is really that reincarnation literature. It's come from multiple sources. The one I'm most familiar with is the University of Virginia, Dr. Ian Stevenson, and now under Dr. Jim Tucker, and they've identified more than 2,500 cases of past life memories in children, where the best explanation appears to be one of reincarnation. And when you start studying that body of literature and realize the lengths that they've gone to, get rid of any fraud or any kind of fiction or what have you, but to really just get to the facts of the case, it's really amazing. And so any kind of discussion of consciousness moving forward from a scientific perspective absolutely must deal with the overwhelming evidence that our souls come back again and again in these lifetimes. And I believe that there's a very strong role played in terms of the connection that is, I believe, reincarnating with loved ones is part of the bigger package.
Oh,
so it really...
I want to interject a question. I want to ask this question to you too, Norm. You are listening to the Vibrant Living Network. I'm Glenn Brooks, along with Dr. Eben Alexander, Proof of Heaven. And the Sorin books will give you some contact for Dr. Norm Shealy, drnormshealy.com. Dr. Shealy to me is a pioneer. He's mastered both sciences. It seems like there's one science that's a hard science, and there's another science that's evolving, and we're seeing beyond what we've seen. We've gone from the horizontal to maybe the vertical, different seeing. So you mentioned, Eben, about healing, 12 years ago. And as people are listening to this show, my son has an international following. I know there's a lot of people grieving around the world. My daughter has started a legacy project from the Michael Brooks, my son. How would you define healing when you were a neurosurgeon, when the hard science and you were, I don't know if you call yourself a mechanist or a non-spiritual person, but how would you say your definition of healing and what the experience is now for you, and how you would share that with others, that is distinct from what it was when you were a practicing neurosurgeon before you had this profound experience of Proof of Heaven?
Well, I had trained in a pretty conventional kind of physicalist understanding that, if we understand the physics, chemistry, and biology of everything in the physical world, then we can explain everything that happens. And I thought that certainly my role as a neurosurgeon and understanding the course that my patients would take, from my point of view, was heavily kind of a materialist view of how it all unfolded. I didn't really have any appreciation of the power of our spiritual nature and of our consciousness, of our free will. And what I would say is my coma journey showed me very clearly that I was completely wrong before. The materialist mindset is wrong. And, in fact, you were saying a little while ago, talking about hard science and about this evolving science. Well, actually, all we really have is the science behind it. And it's just that quantum physics, for example, has been very confusing to materialist scientists because they had no notion of how powerful it would be to put consciousness right there in charge of all that. And, of course, the physicists who founded quantum physics were well into that understanding of the nature of mind and the primacy of consciousness. And I just had to catch up. And I would say all of the scientific community is catching up. But quantum physics lays it out very plainly and simply in many ways that consciousness is fundamental in the universe. Objective idealism is a perfect model. And this explains things like placebo effect. Placebo effect, once you realize how deep it goes and how profound healing can be from advanced cancers, infections, what have you, simply by someone's beliefs and the power of will, then you start to get how this objective idealism really makes sense, and it has everything to do with healing. In fact, I would say some of the most fundamental evidence for the primacy of consciousness in the universe is placebo effect and our ability to heal ourselves. And, of course, profound near-death experiences like mine or like Anita Morjani's and her lymphoma are beautiful examples of how a big spiritual experience like a near-death experience can result in phenomenal healing that goes far beyond any explanation from Western medicine.
I'm glad you brought that up because I somehow think it's related to scalar energy. I have studied and worked with and tried to understand scalar for many decades. Quantum physicists say that all empty space throughout the universe is filled with scalar energy, and in all that empty space, everywhere, in empty space the size of a helium molecule, there's enough energy to boil the world's oceans. And to me, that is the physical manifestation of God's power. And so, a helium molecule, I think, is about as small as anything we know physically. And if there's that kind of energy in there, then in the whole universe, I can't get the numbers straight, but I get the enormity of it. And if there's that kind of power to boil the oceans in that little bit of space, the total power of the universe is beyond comprehension. And we have tapped into a small bit of it here physically.
You're listening to the Vibrant Living Network. I'm Glenn Brooks. There's going to be some new productions I'm excited to share with you. Dr. Eben Alexander, neurosurgeon, awakened spiritual being. Can I call you an awakened spiritual being, awakening spiritual being? Dr.
I would say it's a work in progress. I'm trying to wake up.
All right. I want to ask you this question. So, since Michael Brooks passed away, my daughter's taken over. There's something called the Legacy Project, and Lisa, Lisa, I used to call Lisa my heart chakra on wheels. She still is. It's pretty amazing. So, this past week, she read me some letters. There was one letter as an example where I think the mother passed away, and the little girl saw her sister pass away in a car crash. And so Lisa gets letters from around the world about dealing with grief and shock. I was curious, and I want to pass this back to Norm, of course, after you respond. What about from the conscious and your spiritual awakening, ongoing awakening, around practical healing, what would you say to people that are in this shock where they feel the departed is the overwhelming grief and the heartbrokenness? They're not able to get beyond that. I'm curious to what your comments would be from your own awakening process, and also and your redefinition of what healing is. I would love you to share something for people in that state of crisis and shock, and how it might be a resource back for them to have an experience of peace and bliss in this lifetime. and connection with the loved one?
Well, I would just point out, of course, it's important to realize, I think having a very advanced notion of the eternal nature of our souls and of our soul connections with our loved ones, one still has to grieve when one loses someone from the physical plane. So this is not about denying the grief that is involved in admitting that that a soul has left the physical body. But I think that the important thing is in that whole process of grieving, the more people can kind of learn about this whole literature on near-death experiences and this evidence from the science of consciousness about the eternity of soul and the primacy of mind, I think it can be very healing and to open themselves up. And I know I mentioned to you, Glenn, when we talked before, but certainly for your audience, I would like to stress that book. It's called Hello from Heaven. It's by a good friend of mine, Bill and Judy Guggenheim, and I highly recommend that book. It's very instructive. They've reviewed more than 3,000 cases of people with strong after-death communications, condensed that down to the 350 best cases and reported them in that book. It came out in the mid-'90s, and from my point of view, it still represents one of the best books educating the general public about the reality of after-death communications. And I think that familiarizing oneself with that literature is important. I know a lot of people have told me that they had tremendous kind of relief in their grieving of a lost loved one from reading Proof of Heaven. Proof of Heaven, of course, is my own story, and it really is one that helps people realize that materialism and the notion that brain creates consciousness is an assumption in modern science that actually has nothing to support it compared to the reality of consciousness existing and the brain serving more as a filter. And so the more people can read a few of these books that kind of give them the evidence that the modern scientific worldview of the nature of reality is one that's grown far beyond that simplistic materialist nonsense that tried to pretend that the brain creates consciousness. And I think given the books like Proof of Heaven and books like Hello from Heaven, the literature is out there for people to come to a deeper understanding of the shift in worldview. And that's I think, a big difference from our world of, say, 20, 30, 40 years ago when a lot of these stories and books were not available. So it's really there now. You have groups like International Association of Near-Death Studies, IANDS.org is where people can go to learn a lot more about that. And I think we just have a lot more resources for people to very readily figure out that the predominant scientific worldview about the nature of reality now is one that fully allows not only for the afterlife, but also for reincarnation.
Norm, Dr. Norm, I feel such a deep sense of family with Norm. It's been 34 years. I picked up Dr. Norm's book at a used bookstore, and I thought, oh, my God, it's a doctor talking about health. And Norm is a new breed of doctor. Most doctors say you're normal, go home and die. And here we are today talking about vibrant longevity. Norm, you've helped me with this with Dr. Eben. We're just talking about. Every day I do what I can to embrace the grief. It comes in different moments. What do you feel? And I know you have some products that you've developed that I'm excited to share about with the audience. What is your comment? What do you want to share today from both your scientist and your mystic, your clairvoyant, the part of you that has evolved and learned from your soul resource around grief and I guess heartbreak? What would you share with the audience around how to embrace that and make it vital and loving as one of your loved ones has departed?
Well, obviously, I'd say it took me about a year to feel at peace, if you will, with the loss of my wife. And I used my own techniques, of course, to help me get there. I mean, I immediately began doing cranial electrical stimulation, something I introduced in 1975. Now, I hadn't been using it except occasionally when I travel to reset my time zone sort of thing. But for 1 year, I used the LIST cranial electrostimulator on my head every morning for an hour. That helped me stabilize. And I also, of course, did more consistent, again, hadn't done it that regularly and that intensely since 1972, but autogenic training every day. My favorite tool in my lifetime is autogenic training, and I routinely try to get patients to do it 18 minutes twice a day for 3 months because it does retrain the brain. It helps the brain get back into recognizing detachment. There's no point in playing broken records of how bad things are, no matter what the situation is. It's getting to the state where you can actually say, okay, I accept, I detach. I'm not going to worry, Ward. I'm not going to waste my time and energy doing it. Now, again, I had to do more autogenic training and the cranial stimulator. But at this point, I'm back to my usual of autogenic training. I only have to do a couple of minutes once or twice a day now.
In a moment, I want to ask Dr. Nolan to give us an experience of that. You know what I want to do, since we got brilliant Lily, is there something, Lily's a writer, and she's such a beautiful inquirer. Is there something, I thought you could be the voice of the audience. You could be the flow of consciousness from the audience. Is there anything that's bubbling to you as you listen to Dr. Eben and Dr. Shealy share? Anything bubbling, Lily? I hope I didn't put you on the spot. Welcome and much love to you. Did I put you in shock, Lily? You okay?
I'm not quite sure.
Lily, you there? I'm not sure. All right, maybe she's not able to make the. She's a very sweet person, and I'm going to let you. I'm going to let the audience. Muted. Oh, you're there. Thank you. Here you are.
I was muted. I was sitting here talking to myself.
All right. Do you still love me after me inviting you on like this?
Sure.
Anything bubbles for you? Thank you. Anything bubbles for you? Anything you want to ask? But you have, I want to hear from your listening. What's bubbling for you? What's alive for you in this?
I'm wondering what you're to the doctor, if you could give us a brief synopsis of what transpired during your near-death experience.
Well, yes, I'd be happy to.
Thank you, Lily.
Basically, I think it's important to point out that I woke up at 4:30 in the morning with severe back pain and soon realized I had a horrific headache. And within about 3 hours, I was absolutely miserable, but I was kind of losing my awareness very quickly. Anybody with any medical training hearing of a case of severe back pain, severe headache, would be thinking meningitis. Well, my brain was already being overtaken by that infection, so I was driven deep into coma within about 3.5 hours of onset. And the interesting thing is if you review the medical case report on my medical records, and that came out in the Journal of Nervous and Mental Disease in September 2018, that medical case report is available. Anybody can get to it through my website. If you go to ebenalexander.com, look through my blog postings, go back to September 2018, and you'll find the blog posting about it. And there's a link right there to take you to the case report itself. But the interesting thing, and this was also corroborated by the 3 physicians who wrote that case report. They were not involved in my care, but they were fascinated by my recovery. Once they learned my case, and the recovery is something that really has no reasonable explanation in Western medicine. But the journey that I had, it was in the setting of complete amnesia. Now, that's something that's unusual for an NDE. Near-death experiences, usually the soul going through it has plenty of memory of their life, and that is what features into the experience itself. Now, mine was different, and initially, as a conventionally trained neurosurgeon, I explained all the amnesia that I had from the fact that my brain was so demonstrably wrecked. All 8 lobes of my brain were involved with this infection. And that's why none of this should have been able to happen, according to modern neuroscience, given the documented damage to my brain. But what I did experience began in what I call the earthworm's eye view, a very primitive, coarse, unresponsive realm. It's like being in dirty Jell-O, and I have very strong memories of existing there for what seemed like an eternity, even though it just was a long time. Given my amnesia, it was the only existence I'd ever known. I had no memories of Earth, no words, no language, no knowledge of Eben Alexander's life, none of my religious beliefs or scientific knowledge. Every bit of that was gone for the entire journey. And I came to realize in the months and years after that it actually happened for a reason. It was a necessary step to help me understand more about my soul journey. But that amnesia was very important. Luckily, though, I was not in that earthworm eye view forever. What happened was a slowly spinning white light that came towards me and opened up like a rip in the fabric of that ugly earthworm eye view, and it led up into this brilliant, ultra-real gateway valley. And that valley had a lot of Earth-like features, but in many ways it was kind of like Plato's world of ideals for an individual soul. And I remember seeing all these thousands of beings dancing down below. My awareness was as a speck of awareness on a butterfly wing among millions of other butterflies, looping and spiraling in these vast formations above that gateway valley. There was a lovely guardian angel beside me, and her message to me, I think, was the central message I was to bring back. You are deeply loved and cherished forever. You have nothing to fear. You will be taken care of. That was the message that was telepathically delivered to me, and I cannot tell you how reassuring and affirming and kind of heartwarming that message was at that time. That's when I witnessed all these beings down in the valley below, as I said, lots of joy and merriment. And it was because up above were these swooping orbs of angelic choirs that were emanating chants and anthems and hymns that would just thunder through my awareness. And there was also this extremely memorable sensation of what I call the breath of God, or this divine wind that blew through that scene. And it was my first knowing in that amnesic setting of the presence of that divine, infinitely healing God force. And that was a beautiful part of that Gateway Valley. It turns out that the angelic choirs above were providing yet another musical portal to higher and higher levels. I remember seeing all of four-dimensional space-time collapsing down, all of that spiritual realm, the Gateway Valley, and a completely different ordering of causality that I call deep time. Very important to understand that what we look at as earth flow of time is only a subjective flow that's put in place there by our very consciousness as part of the unfolding of this drama that we live in. But there's a whole deeper ordering of causality that I call deep time that is more apparent from those spiritual realms, and it also would mark the progression of souls through multiple incarnations. That deep time would mark the transcendence and evolution of consciousness itself. But all of that was apparent, especially from the highest realm, that core realm that I entered going through yet another sound portal provided through those angelic choirs. And that core realm was the farthest I went. But in that realm, it was of infinite space in all eternity, the entire higher dimensional multiverse having been shrunken down to this complex oversphere as part of the lessons I was to learn. And then I was told in that core realm, again, not in words, but the words I used to explain it all when I wrote it all up weeks later when I'd recovered, when I was coming back, when I'd awakened from coma, is that core realm was basically the pure oneness. That was my knowing of the origin of our conscious awareness as being identical with that infinitely healing God force. And then I would tumble back down to that earthworm eye view and then learn that by recovering the musical notes of the melody, I could conjure up that portal, that beautiful gateway of light that would take me back up into the earth, back into the Gateway Valley, and then from there back into the core realm. But always experiencing that beautiful girl on the butterfly wing and her reassuring message, and seeing all those souls dancing below. And a lot of the message was delivered there, but some of the deepest aspects of it were in the core itself. And then there came a time at the end of it all where I could no longer conjure up using the musical notes of the melody to take me from the earthworm eye view into the Gateway Valley. And I realized then that what I'd been told in the core that I was going back was actually coming true. But I didn't know where I was going back to. And that's where I was aware of thousands of beings going off into the distance, and this murmuring energy coming from them. And again, this was back in that kind of murky earthworm eye view territory, but it was different this time because that murmuring energy brought tremendous love and comfort to me. And I realized that that was the power of prayer. That's what I identified it as. And then I saw 6 faces that were very important because they were faces of people who were physically present in the ICU room the last 24 hours of coma. And that's important because it showed me that the vast majority of my coma journey had to happen between days 1 and 5. And that's when I came back to this world. When I returned to that ICU bed, I had no idea who these loved ones around the bedside were. My amnesia was still completely running the show. But over hours, my language came back, and over hours and days, my recollections of these people, these family members, these loved ones at the bedside came back. And so that's when all of it, then I came back to this world, and the rest of it has been that 12-year journey since then of making sense of it, realizing over 2 months I had a full return of all of my memories, and that was a complete shock, completely unexpected by any of my physicians, and certainly not by me. And then so the rest of it has really been trying to unravel this extraordinary journey and make sense of it. And the biggest gift is that the details of my medical case, as that case reports show, would not allow for any kind of advanced dream or hallucination to occur. My brain was too devastated by this illness. And that is the real gift of it all, was that extraordinary meningoencephalitis and having such an extraordinary spiritual journey.
Well,
thank you, Norm. I wanted to say, I wanted to get your comments around remarkable healing as well, Norm, because I feel like what Dr. Eben Alexander sharing is a recovery that's beyond explanation, that is so spiritually infused, and I know you've facilitated and blessed many people with that kind of healing. I love your comments. Love your comments. You're listening to the Vibrant Living Network with Dr. Eben Alexander and Dr. Norm Shealy. Please, Norm, go ahead.
I have never had a near-death experience, but I've had 2 very remarkable out-of-body experiences coming totally alive. The first one was in 1972. I was at a meeting with about 212 people, and all of a sudden I'm up on the ceiling looking down at the audience below, and a harpist was playing music, and I don't know, I probably wasn't more than 5 minutes at the most, but I was back in my body. And then I've been in hypnotic trance many, many times. I could put myself into it, but I wanted to see if he could make me amnesic. So I had an expert hypnotist put me into a deep trance to see if he could make me amnesic, and he couldn't. I'm out of body, watching him and see my body down below, but I'm sitting up on the ceiling, noticing everything.
With your memories intact.
Exactly. And in that experience, he said, well, go visit Olga Warhol, the great healer. And so I suddenly said, well, Olga's in her living room, and she just walked over and picked up a book and opened it and put it back down. When I got home, I called Olga and asked her what the book was. The book actually was a book dedicated to me and my past life.
Really?
Nice. That's great.
Yeah. And it was, I was in London. Anyway, that's one of my most memorable past lives. And I've got all kinds of experience that. And, of course, I've done hundreds of people where I have guided them into past lives and even into current lives sometimes. My favorite case, I think, of all was a woman who was dying of metastatic cancer. I mean, she was sent to me for pain control, cancer all over her body. I did a 20-minute exercise on forgiveness. And this woman, for the first time since she'd been at the hospital with me, got up and walked out of the room. 3 months later, her cancer was gone, never to return. A year and a half later, she says, Norm, during that experience, I suddenly recognized how much I hated my family because of the way they had treated me. And when I got home and told my husband I was going to get well, he committed suicide.
Wow.
I mean, I've had remarkable experiences like that. My other favorite case is a woman who was paralyzed from a gunshot wound through the abdomen and intractable pain in her legs and etc. And I did a past life on her, and she gave an absolutely perfect history of being Anne Boleyn up to the rolling of her head when the guillotine fell. And she did, and for one of the few cases in my entire history of doing this, she couldn't remember things she'd said. Fortunately, I'd recorded it. And I played it back to her, and she started crying. She said, I don't know. I said, well, I know. You just told me that you think your husband shot you, because she told me she shot herself accidentally.
Yeah.
And when I awoke after surgery, I was told I had shot myself accidentally. The last thing I remember, my husband and I were having an argument.
Mm-hmm.
So her pain was totally controlled after that. Her paralysis not covered, but she divorced her husband and went to work as a social science worker in a pain clinic for the rest of her life. And I've had remarkable recoveries of all kinds of things and memories of people after past life therapy sessions.
You wrote a book. I know the title changed. It's an older book, but the original title was Occult Medicine Can Save Your Life. When I was listening to Eben share his experience, my breathing changed. I felt, and when you shared too, I feel like, I guess what I want to ask you, how do we make ourselves available? How does someone listening right now can make themselves available to miraculous healing or an unexplainable healing? Like with Eben sharing, I feel like he's speaking beyond just there's a different song coming through. And when you're sharing, it's something that we're not used to. It's taking us beyond the linear world. How do we make ourselves receptive to the miraculous healing right now? Like if someone's listening right now, any suggestions that you would share? Because Eben was able to, Eben, he's so beautiful in his languaging. He's able to language and be aware of these domains that have no language. They're really beautiful. Very good song, Eben. It was beautiful when you shared your story.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I have 68 different recordings of guided imagery, and the one that would most likely take you where I've been talking about is one called multi-level awareness. That is the technique that I actually use for past life therapy, and it's on my website. I don't really recommend that people with serious problems do it on themselves. Yes. I really think it's better to have a guide to help you, but it is possible.
Eben, thank you. You're listening to the Vibrant Living Network on Glenn Brooks. Our expanding network includes many new formats, including one that I'm still playing with the name. It's going to be up to the infinite life. It's going to be about maintain deep contact with your loved ones and blossom new life. Wow. How is this language of healing and awareness in your current life? Could you distinguish, like you articulated, God, that was such a beautiful song, Dr. Eben, so beautiful. How would you articulate bringing that language of your soul and of your consciousness to this life? Has it changed the way you touch people? Is it changed the way you meet their auras? Like, how is this transferred into your physical, energetic movement and intelligence now? Do you notice it profoundly in each moment?
Yes, and I would say, my advice to people who want to start bringing this kind of healing and this kind of awareness into their life is that it really just involves a practice of better defining and kind of exploring your relationship with that primordial force of love at the core of the universe, that force of healing. And the word God is certainly applicable, but for some people, the word God is a bit of a buzzword, and they have trouble with it. But the reality here is all we're talking about is the neuroscience of consciousness and the nature of reality, and the very real way in which people can go within mind and start to realize that their mind and their will overlaps tremendously with the will of the universe and with that God force that has tremendous power to heal. Remember in this discussion that your ego is not your ally in this. The ego, the little voice in our heads. I love how Michael Singer in his book, The Untethered Soul, he calls that voice in the head the annoying roommate. And that's a very important concept because so many of us think that voice in our head is who we are. And that, I promise you, that is not the deep mystery of consciousness. The voice in the head is part of the linguistic brain, and it's the ego mind, and the ego, remember, has the main tools of fear and anxiety that it uses for control. But this is about coming to realize, and I would strongly encourage people to develop a daily practice of meditation or centering prayer. For me, they're really one and the same thing. But it's really coming to, meditating every day. I've developed a far richer relationship with that God force that I first encountered in my NDE. And I think everyone as a sentient being has the power of going within and starting to develop that relationship and realize that we are eternal beings. I mean, the more we explore that and the more I do that through meditation, the more I've come to see evidence for that. If people need a powerful tool to help them in meditating, what I would recommend is the tool that I use personally, and that's the one that we talk about in detail in our book, Living in a Mindful Universe, and that tool is Sacred Acoustics Binaural Beat Brainwave Entrainment. And it's just a very powerful way to kind of separate our conscious awareness from our bodily sense of here, now, and sense of self. And binaural beats were shown to be very powerful in terms of expanding consciousness in the late 20th century, both work of Robert Monroe and his work with out-of-body experiences, and he found binaural beats to be very useful. Likewise, certain people involved in remote viewing, in the psychic spy programs, that kind of thing, found that binaural beat brainwave entrainment was a very powerful way to help them get into deep transcendental states of conscious awareness. And it's something we explain a lot more in our book, Living in a Mindful Universe. But the bottom line is that I think by developing a richer relationship with the forces at the very origin of our conscious awareness, we can start to learn for ourselves this connection we have with the universe, with souls of departed loved ones, and we can start using those daily meditations and that practice of centering prayer to prove to ourselves the reality of this connection that we sense. In many ways, it just supports the power of prayer in healing, and that is something that I know Dr. Shealy has been involved in for years, and another good friend of mine, Dr. Larry Dossey, has written about extensively. Anybody who wants to learn more about that, read Larry Dossey's book, Healing Words, and you'll learn a tremendous amount about the power of prayer to heal. It's fascinating, but once we realize that we're far grander than just, this little physical body, and we exist for much more than just birth to death of this physical body, we start to gain tremendous power. And that power is one of love and kindness and compassion. It can be used to enhance our relationships with others and our sense of belonging in this universe. So it's all good.
I like it. I need a T-shirt that says that. I like that. You're listening to the Vibrant Living Network. You're listening to the Vibrant Living Network on Glenn Brooks. We do have a Vibrant Speakers Summit coming up, which, of course, I'll be running Dr. Eben and Dr. Shealy. I also want to say, Michael, I just love you so, so much. And I know I'm in good company with these two sort of mystical neurosurgeons that are bringing a new practical science that's accessible. And this other song, there's two songs in every moment. There's a song of our conditioned self, but this other song allows us to touch and experience things way different. I also want to tell Alicia that my daughter Alicia is so remarkable. She's over at Netflix. She's got the babysitting club. I'm bragging about it. I love her so much. I'm going to invite her on to meet you guys. She's as I stand here, a lot of images of my son, and I send you guys all my love, and particularly people around the world who have loved Michael's show. I send you my love. And Lily, I just want to get back to you because you asked Dr. Eben a question. I want to go to Dr. Shealy. I hope you're not muted. I wanted to see if you wanted to respond to that. I wanted to do this quick exercise that Norm does so beautifully on, this deeper relaxation. You have a comment, a quick comment, Lily?
No, I appreciated the story. I saw your passion in the story of your awakening, and that's fantastic. That was my comment.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. Of course, as we continue this year long, I want to ask questions like how this has affected your touch, Eben and Norm. I want to get a sense of, like, being this practical mystic, how it carries into the physicality, and how, I did a whole series with Richard Moss, who wrote the I That Is We. And what was kind of interesting is we talked about this quality Richard called radical aliveness. So radical aliveness is this place where you're sort of in touch with this other pulsation of life that's beyond, I like to call it's beyond terminal normality. So our series with Dr. Norm is really about being vibrantly alive, and alive in a way that's sort of beyond the constraints of your limited linear mind. Norm, we only got a little while to go, but I thought maybe you could give people an experience as you do so wonderfully, and it always settles me down so deeply, of the program that you say has so much clinical research that allows us to kind of get into a state that's medicinal and powerful for our physical bodies, but also makes us receptive to more spiritual. I think you told me 80% of the time that it also helps people with their blood pressure issues. Let's give people an experience. I always love when you do this. Is there anything you want to say about this? Say something briefly about it, because I know it's something you really treasure and prescribe for people.
Well, the most important thing is there are 28,000 scientific references on this particular technique, and my Ph.D. in psychology was my entire study of self-regulation, self-control, and what I now call biogenics, the origin of life. But it started off with autogenic training, and it is a basic technique. You relax, close your eyes, and you repeat the words after me in your own mind. As you breathe in, my arms and legs, as you breathe out, are heavy and warm. My arms and legs are heavy and warm. My arms and legs are heavy and warm. My arms and legs are heavy and warm. My heartbeat is calm and regular. 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 My breathing is free and easy. 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 My abdomen is warm. My abdomen is warm. My abdomen is warm. My abdomen is warm. My forehead is cool. My forehead is cool. My forehead is cool. My forehead is cool. My mind is quiet and still. 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 I am at peace. I am at peace. I am at peace. I am at peace. Now, in the training part of this, you do this about 18 minutes. Mm-hmm. Today, most of the time, I just have to repeat each phrase one time, and I'm there. It's a trained experience. Mm-hmm. So in 1 to 2 minutes, I can put myself into that detached state.
Yes. That's very beautiful. Please give out, and then I'll ask you, Eben, too. Please give out your website so people could follow up and learn about the treasure of wonderful, deeply, profoundly healing holistic resources that you could practice and also you could use.
There, normshealy.com, normshealy.com. Okay. The real website is actually realholisticdoc.com, but the Norm Shealy converts you to that website. Is there you can find all of this stuff and more.
Beautiful. All right. And by the way, Eben, I feel that we have an old soul relationship. I'm so happy to. It's going to sound funny, but maybe I feel like to meet you in this lifetime has been a very deep honor. So I'm very, very honored by your wisdom and your sharing today. And I'm so eager to unfold something that contributes beautifully to people with you and keep our conversation going with Dr. Norm. How can people find your wonderful resources and be in touch with you?
Well, you can go to Eben, EBEN, Alexander.com, and there's a lot of information there about the books, blogs. There's a reading list with more than 100 recommended chapters, papers, books, many of them with hot links that take you right to the paper. And then also, so EbenAlexander.com is a great starting point. I would also recommend people who are interested in this can follow my partner, Karen Newell, and I. She was the co-author of Living in a Mindful Universe, our third book. And they can follow us if they go to unitedinhopeandhealing.com. We do, there you can sign up. Every 2 weeks we do free webinars there. We have guests. We've been doing these for almost a year now, and we're going to keep doing them. We love them, and a lot of people love it. So we get a lot of positive feedback. But unitedinhopeandhealing.com is how you can access those free webinars. And then also I would recommend anyone interested in learning more about the meditative techniques that I've discussed, go to sacredacoustics.com. That's Karen Newell's website. She's my partner, and she has some training videos, and you'll find there are a lot of audio files that are available there that can help people get into very deep transcendental states of conscious awareness. So those will really be the main places to go. And for any out there interested in mental health practitioners and healing using these techniques, there's a 9-hour video course that we recorded with Dr. Anna Yusim. She's a New York psychiatrist who used sacred acoustics tones and wrote about them in a pilot study showing a 26% reduction in anxiety and depression in patients over 2 weeks using these sacred acoustics tones. And that course for mental health practitioners is available at becomingmorewhole.com. But those are the main places where people can get in touch and kind of follow a lot of the work we do and start to learn about it and put it to use in their own lives.
Thank you deeply. I feel like our journey's just begun. Thank you, Dr. Eben Alexander, deeply. Uncle Norm, Dr. Shealy, thank you. One of the gifts of this lifetime is meeting you and learning wisdom. And Lily, sending you my love and appreciation. Your life, precious and joy, and I'm Glenn Brooks for the Vibrant Living Network. I'll be with you soon. Check out for new announcements my network, my website, vibrantliving.network.com, vibrantliving.network.com. Thank you all. Much love.
Blessings. Thanks, Eben. Have a good one.
Thank you, Norm, and thanks, Glenn. It's great talking with you.
Blessings to all.